My grandfather was a mailman. My parents, first in their families to go to college. In fact, I will do a little shout out here. My mom's here. Lainey, you have to give away about both. Both my mom and my dad went to school right here at Marquette, and my mom's on the Women's Leadership Council here. And I grew up actually watching Al McGuire and Marquette play in the national championship. There's just so many things that I hold very dear in Milwaukee and in Wisconsin. And I'm deeply concerned about the direction that we're heading in Wisconsin. I think we deserve a lot better in terms of our economy, in terms of our commitment to education, and I believe we have great potential. We can do better. And as you mentioned, Mike, I did introduce my jobs plan this morning, and I'm really excited about the opportunities we have here in Wisconsin.
Well, let's talk about the jobs plan. It's called Invest for Success, and there are cynics when they hear politicians or candidates use the word invest. They say, uh-oh, hold on to your wallet. This is going to cost a lot of money. Why that name, and why did it take 5 months for you to come up with this plan?
Sure. Well, I was very, I thought a lot about the title. And I came up with the title because I thought back on my experience as an executive at Trek Bicycle. And Trek is a very successful company, has done very well. It was founded in 1976. It employs nearly 1,000 people right here in Wisconsin, sells its products all over the world. Trek is successful for a couple of reasons. One, because of the people, and the people that it has there, the people that they can attract and retain and develop in that company, but also because of the investments that Trek makes. And it looks at the decisions and the potential in the marketplace. The division that I ran, we increased sales from $3 million to over $50 million. This was opening up new markets in Europe. And so instead, a lot of bike companies at that point will go through distributors. Trek decided it was going to invest so that it could control its marketing and distribution and that it would be able to sell more of its products. So it did take investment. But that has paid off multiple times over the years. Or whether they look at a new area of the bike market where they're not competing, that might involve investing in more engineering talent or product design people. Certainly in reaching new markets, you spend money in marketing and advertising. Every good business person knows if you want to grow, you need to make investments. So absolutely, this plan is about making investments, but it doesn't mean that it costs more money. Because it is about making priorities and setting a vision and then figuring out how you're going to get there. The state budget, biennium budget, is a $70 billion budget. So my belief is there's money in that budget that we can make sure that we are setting the priorities that are based on creating jobs and having a thriving economy here, and that it doesn't have to mean that it costs more. It means we reprioritize and we're spending money wisely.
Who did you talk to in putting this together? What kinds of conversations were you having?
I probably had talked with hundreds of people over the last 5 months, and whether it was just some of the examples here in Milwaukee. I sat down with Tim Sheehy at MMAC. I talked to Mike Lovell at UWM. I talked to Julia Taylor at the Greater Milwaukee Committee. Educators, economists, experts in their field. Some of the work that has gone into this comes from Michael Porter, who is a well-known expert out of the Harvard Business School around industry clusters, educators, CEOs. So lots of people, and along with reading prior reports. I don't believe that just because someone else or another group did a report that I need to start from scratch and not build on some of the good ideas that have already been developed.
Yeah, Governor Walker has said that what he wanted to do when he took office here is to change the business climate, to make this a pro-business state. And so I was struck when I read this document. It's about 40 pages, and I read it this morning. I was struck by a comment you made in there. You said, despite all the pro-business talk, the Wisconsin economy is being held back by the lack of a business-like approach. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that?
A business-like approach you set goals, and you make sure you have plans in place to achieve those goals. You actually have strategies for achieving them, that you monitor your progress, that you make corrections if you're not on the path that you think is going to get you there, and that you're honest about the strengths, the weaknesses, and the potential. And I don't think that has been done. I brought here not only my own plan, but I brought Governor Walker's plan from 2010. This is 4 pages. I've seen 8th grade term papers that frankly have more work put into them. And, I just think when you get serious, I read through a lot of economic development plans in putting together this plan, and none of them were 4 pages long. We're talking about a state's economy. We're talking about our future, and it deserves some serious thinking and some real detail and some real plans. So yes, and setting goals, making sure you have plans to achieve those goals, and that you have the benchmarks for knowing if you're on track.
So what would you do differently? What is either not being done or not being done as well as you think it can be?
Well, I will go through. This is sort of wonky. I hope I won't be too boring to anyone here. But the 5 key strategies in there, first and foremost, is we're going to align our economic development efforts around our industry clusters. So this builds on the strengths that we have here in Wisconsin, whether it's our manufacturing or agriculture or high tech. This is really economic development thought that has been effective in other places in the country and even outside of the country. We then make sure that we are aligning our workforce needs and creating the type of workforce skills and education that are going to make sure Wisconsin is competing for the jobs. In this report, I cite a research study that says Wisconsin needs to create 670,000 more degree holders by 2025 to compete for the jobs of tomorrow. That means we have to increase the capacity, particularly in our higher ed. So that can be a certificate, an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, but it does mean we have to be building up our education system to make sure we have greater capacity, that we are aligning it with the job market, and that we're making sure that students are persistent in that. And I say we have to start in K-12. We can't have students graduating from high school and not already having thought of what their career paths are going to be, and that they're already being prepared for that. So the third is entrepreneurial climate. Under Governor Walker, we're 48th in the country in terms of new businesses started, and yet new businesses and small businesses account for 70% of the jobs created. So for Wisconsin to have a top 10 thriving economy, we have to do a lot more in these areas than we're doing now. Exports is another area. We have to make sure that Wisconsin is a global state. And as I mentioned with Trek, I have experience with increasing sales of Wisconsin products all over the world. We have to be a lot more aggressive with that. And then we have to have a great climate for business, but also for living. That keeps people here and attracts people. So there are things that Governor Walker is doing, but they're not moving the needle. When you say we set up a state venture capital fund and it's $25 million, when other states around us are setting up $200 million funds and the needs that our new companies have are much greater than that, $25 million doesn't move the needle. We have to be a lot more bold. We have to be more aggressive rather than just sort of checking the box and say, I did a venture capital fund or I did worker training. The needs are much greater than anything that we're doing right now.
I'm going to drill down on a lot of these points, but just to follow up on the venture capital one, I think I saw in there you said something about you want to increase the venture capital fund in Wisconsin from roughly $30 million to $120 million over 4 years. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of money, state money, right?
Yes.
And you think that investment will pay off? You're confident that if you invest that kind of dollars, it will pay off?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, these are investments. This is a venture capital fund. You're investing side by side with actual private investors. This is money we're going to get back, Mike, and we'll be able to reinvest in more Wisconsin companies. So it's not as if we're just spending it and we won't see it again. So yes, and when you do look at a $70 billion state budget, it's actually a very small amount of that budget. But it doesn't mean we won't be wise about how we spend it and make sure that we have the accountability.
Let me delve into each of those topics you just mentioned, the strategies you just mentioned, the clusters of opportunity. Probably be some people, including the governor's office, who say, we're already doing that. We've got the Water Council going down in southeast Wisconsin. We've got a pretty vital technology area in the UW Research Park. We've got the printing industry. We're doing that. How is that different than what you're proposing?
Well, I would do it a whole lot more. I mean, those are isolated examples. This is about looking at every one of our strong clusters and providing the impetus and the support so that industry is able to align themselves and look at the areas to work on within those clusters of business attraction, exports, entrepreneurism, regulation and taxes, infrastructure. So not only do you need to have clusters, but you have to make sure they're effective and they're actually working in a way that is going to help support their development. I don't think they're getting enough support from the state. We're not addressing enough of our key industries through these clusters, and we're not aligning them in a way that is looking at their workforce needs over the longer term. I mean, one of the examples I give is to make sure we have an economist assigned to each one of our clusters to be able to forecast workforce needs, then tie that into our local efforts in our technical colleges or our universities to make sure that we are preparing to have that workforce that is going to fulfill those needs.
And one of the things you talk about in this report is the brain drain in Wisconsin. We hear a lot about that. Mayor Norquist, the former mayor of Milwaukee, used to say there was a brain gain in Milwaukee where you would have students coming here to attend school, but they would leave after they graduated for other opportunities. What can government do besides putting up walls around the state of Wisconsin to keep our best and brightest here? What can we do about that?
Well, it is a serious issue, and I talk to folks every day who give me examples of that. The biggest thing that we can do is make sure that we are growing our economy and we are creating the types of opportunities so young people stay. And just last month, I was sitting down with some folks in a diner in Monroe, Wisconsin, and I'm sitting right next to them, just like this, and I asked her what her biggest worries were. She said her biggest worries is her daughter. And I'm like, she says, it's not that she's in trouble or anything, but she graduated from UW-Madison in May. So this was February. She graduated in May, hasn't found a job yet. I hear these stories all the time, and parents are worried that their kids are going to leave. So the biggest thing that we can do is make sure we have a thriving economy. And the latest job numbers that came out just last week showing that we're 35th in the country overall in job creation, that out of 10 Midwestern states, we're 9th. We've been growing at half the national average. So we aren't creating the opportunities that young people want to see to be able to stay, or at least not enough of them. So first and foremost is we have to have a growing, thriving economy, particularly in the new areas in which young people may have the greatest interest. Also around new businesses and entrepreneurism. That helps to keep and attract students. I mean, my nephews, I have two nephews who live in the Milwaukee area. One of them started his own business. He's a Marquette graduate and started his own business 2 or 3 years ago. Those are the sorts of things that people will keep people staying. But we also have to have vibrant communities. We have to be prepared to invest in our communities, and we have to take on the challenges that our communities face. So here in Milwaukee, we do have challenges. I love Milwaukee. I think we have incredible potential here, but we have to take on some of the challenges around our education system, around high unemployment in the central city, about lack of job growth right here in downtown. Those are things that make a big difference to making sure we keep people in the state. But we also, there's a lot of tactics in this plan that talk about just having better connections between companies and our universities, increasing the amount of internships so that when students are graduating, they already have connections with local employers. So there is a lot that we can be doing. And again, that's another way of utilizing your clusters in a way that's not being used now.
You mentioned taxes in here, and that's part of the climate. The governor feels it's an important part of the climate here, that we had sort of a hostile environment toward business. I think that's probably a way he would describe it until he took office. I'm wondering why there maybe isn't more discussion of taxes in this particular proposal or recipe for economic success. Do you feel that taxes are a significant detriment to business and economic development in the state?
I think that and there is actually a section on taxes in the plan, and I believe that we have to make sure that we hold the line on taxes. As governor, I'm going to hold the line on taxes, and our property and our income taxes are higher than the national average, although that's offset by having a significantly lower sales tax. So taxes, no doubt, are part of it, but I think that companies, particularly companies in this competitive environment, look to making sure that they can get a skilled, qualified workforce, that they can attract people to work for their company, regardless of where they are in the state, and that's about having vibrant, safe, and strong communities. And I will go back to my experience at TREC. TREC has started, from a couple of people to nearly 1,000 employees here in Wisconsin, and has been successful, and thinks that Wisconsin is a great place to do business and has never considered leaving it. Do they feel that the taxes need to change? I don't think that that's on their top 25 lists of what is most important to making sure that Trek Bicycle is a successful company. So it's one of the elements, but I think that there's a lot of elements that go into it.
I have to ask you something. I already saw the head of the Republican Party in the state tweet about this earlier today, but it did catch my attention when I looked at the report. You talked about you'd like to see a program created that would encourage manufacturers who are doing business manufacturing overseas come back to Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And the Republicans said, well, isn't that ironic, because Trek Bicycle does a fair amount of manufacturing overseas. What's your response to that?
Well, there are more and more reasons that a lot of manufacturers are looking at being able to bring jobs back here, and part of that is fuel costs. Another one is being able to respond to their customers more. Trek manufactures more bicycles in the U.S. than any other bike company, but it is a competitive industry. But as governor, I'm going to work with all Wisconsin manufacturers. I'm going to identify as many opportunities as possible to bring more manufacturing jobs back to the United States. I don't know if you saw, but last year, about a year ago, Walmart announced that they were launching a $50 billion initiative to bring $50 billion more of products back to U.S. manufacturing that they buy over 10 years. Then they followed up with that by having a conference in August in Orlando that was about U.S. manufacturing and being able to increase that. That conference was attended by 7 governors. I was asked by a Wisconsin business person who does business with Walmart, why wasn't Governor Walker there, touting the benefits of Wisconsin as a place to bring jobs back to manufacturing. So I will be at those conferences. I will be fighting to make sure that we are taking advantage of all the opportunities and touting Wisconsin as a great place to do business.
I noticed that, and I think I mentioned this on the TV show the past week, but I noticed you met with Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce. You met with the president and CEO, Kurt Bauer.
Yeah.
I said it was interesting, maybe even surprising.
Mm-hmm.
They're probably going to run a lot of ads that are not necessarily going to be terribly flattering.
You don't think they're going to be with me?
Well, I don't know. I guess that depends on how persuasive you were during that meeting. But why have that meeting? What's the point of that meeting? Probably knowing how that's all going to come down.
Well, I think it's a big contrast between how I do business and Governor Walker does. My feeling is to reach out to people who might not be with me politically if there is a feeling that there is common ground. And I am running to be able to create a much better business climate, a much stronger economy, and that happens by having good relationships with business. And as Secretary of Commerce, I traveled around the state. I met a lot of business people. In fact, one of the reasons that I called Kurt Bauer was because I had talked to Dan Ahrens, who is the new chair of WMC. I met Dan when I was Secretary of Commerce and visited Ahrens and Brillion a couple of times, and so had gotten to know Dan a little bit and talked with him now that he's the new chair about getting together and talking. He said, you should call Kurt. So we sat down. I think when you're talking about the economy, you have to engage people who are vital to that economy and represent those who are. And so I walked away feeling, there is common ground here. There is areas that we can work together and that there are similar ideas. So that's just the way that I do business. I don't see ideas as Republican or Democratic ideas. I see ideas and pick those based on which ones are going to work, which ones are going to move the state forward, and then making sure we bring people together to work on those issues.
A quick question about the minimum wage, something else also contained in this document. You favor a gradual increase in the minimum wage in Wisconsin to $10.10 an hour. I think originally in this campaign you favored a 35-cent increase in the minimum wage. What occurred that caused your thought to evolve on that issue?
Well, the 35 cents was what a specific proposal in the legislature. So I was asked would I support that, and I said I definitely supported it. I wanted to make sure before I supported the 1010 that I had talked to businesses across as to whether they felt that would have a negative impact on their businesses. So I talked to small businesses, I talked to large businesses, and what I heard from businesses is they were supportive of that. And the ones who had already increased their wages higher than the minimum wage found that it reduced turnover. So it actually helped their businesses. It means people have more money to put into the economy. They get less turnover in their workforce. And also, people are not dependent. It doesn't mean people will be dependent on government assistance. We just can't have it where we have people who are working full-time and they're still dependent on our government programs.
I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about education. You're a Madison School Board member. I know this is a subject that you're very interested in. You've been fairly outspoken on it in recent weeks. You said you would repeal a couple of measures that were enacted recently. You want to get rid of the tax deduction for parents who send their kids to private schools. You'd like to see the expansion, the statewide expansion of the voucher program repealed. What do we do about Milwaukee and Racine, where there are active voucher programs currently operating?
Well, I think we have to operate within the framework that exists here. And I think we have to stop the battles, frankly, that are between vouchers and charters and the public schools and say, how are we going to work together to improve education here in Milwaukee? I think there's a great opportunity, and we have to be honest to say, within those three different types of schools, you have in each of those good schools that are doing well. You have good public schools, you have good charter schools, and you have good voucher schools. But you also have bad schools within each one of those as well. And I'd say we've been wasting too much energy pitting those against each other than to say, how are we actually going to improve education overall in Milwaukee? Build on the good things that are happening, because there are a lot of good things happening, but also take on the challenges that are standing in the way of making sure that students are succeeding. So when I came out and said that I would work to repeal the statewide expansion of vouchers, that is because once you get outside of Milwaukee or Racine, this expansion is taking money away that we need to basically fund our public schools, and that the research here in Milwaukee shows that overall there is no increase in student learning in vouchers or in charters. Doesn't mean there aren't good examples in each one of those, but this is not a program that should be expanded statewide without any accountability, using money that at a point at which we are not being able to fund any increases in our public schools, making the challenges that they're taking on less. I mean, this is a serious issue. We have 400 some school districts across our state. Most of them are rural districts. I was up in Rhinelander a couple of months ago. Remember now, it's 25 below in the morning when I woke up. But I met with some business people there who are strong supporters of the public schools. They realize how vital it is to their community. And even though their students attend private school for religious reasons, they told me what bad shape their schools are in there, that they have cut to the bone, and that they are concerned that there hasn't been any increase in state funding. So this issue around public education is important, because we are not going to move forward as a state unless we are understanding that we have to redefine the role of our high schools. We have to make sure we are graduating kids who are ready for college or for a career, and we're not going to be able to do it if we take money away to fund a whole second school system. But that's the statewide. But here in Milwaukee, I'd say let's get people around the table. Let's figure out how we can build on the good things that are happening. Let's address what the challenges are with MPS and the issues that they face by having declining enrollment, which make it very difficult to manage the schools. And I just know we have so many good people in this community who are working on issues of education that we can find solutions.
I'll ask you about MPS in a moment, but just to be clear, Governor says the statewide expansion of the voucher program is about choices, options for parents. You just simply don't buy that.
I don't buy it. I think what we have to do is we have to make sure the choices are good ones. They are not going to, if you just create more choices, but they aren't good choices, we are not going to move the state forward.
Do you like that accountability measure that looks like it will be acted on by the legislature, which will essentially have all these different types of schools under the same report card? Does that appeal to you, or are you skeptical about that?
Well, I'm skeptical because there's no consequences in it. So I don't know how you call something an accountability bill if it doesn't have any consequences in it. I think about one of my sisters. She's not here today, but we were talking about her daughter getting her first cell phone. You know, they went through, before she got the cell phone, they laid out what the rules were, they were laying out what the consequences are. And what we did with this statewide expansion of vouchers was we expanded it without talking about the rules and without talking about the consequences. And the bill that is being acted on doesn't have any consequences at all. So I don't think it's an accountability bill.
Let me go back to MPS. And I should say that you're familiar with MPS. You've done some work in the past looking at the finances of the system. And I want to ask you this. We're now going to be looking for a new superintendent here in Milwaukee again. And there are a few folks in this town who are saying maybe we should go back and look at doing what your former boss, Governor Doyle, and Mayor Barrett talked about in 2009, and that's having the mayor essentially assume control of MPS. Should an idea like that be on the table? Would it be on the table if you were governor?
I don't think it's an idea we should put on the table. I really think that this is the time to not be fighting that battle when the battles we need to fight are how are we going to improve education. As you mentioned, Mike, I serve on the school board in Madison. We have a superintendent who is hired by the board. The board obviously oversees the district. We have a lot of issues in the Madison School District as well. We also have a very strong union in the Madison School Districts. We have been able to work through that. In fact, I mean, when I ran for school board, the union ran someone against me. And not because they don't think I'm serious and committed to public education, but because they knew I wasn't a rubber stamp. And I wouldn't be. But I don't want to distract from improving our schools, improving the instruction that's going on in the class, Ryan, by fighting the battle again about mayoral control versus the school board. I think we can address the issues around student learning. It will be hard work, but I founded an initiative in Madison starting 6 years ago that brought together the public schools and the Boys and Girls Club. It was saying, you know, it's not just about pointing fingers at our schools and saying they're not doing the job, but saying how can we collaborate, how can we address our issues together. This program, which was oriented towards students from low-income families, most of whom would be the first in their families to go to college, now has 650 students in it. We already have 100 who have gone on to college. We have an annual assessment done by UW-Madison where we track very closely the effectiveness of the program. It is a model that can be built on. I mention it only because I know that we can be successful if we find the common ground and we work together.
We're on a college campus. There are a few college students in here today. I see a few faces that look somewhat familiar. Let me ask you a couple of questions that seem to be important to young folks today. One of them is on the same-sex marriage issue. We passed a constitutional amendment back in 2006 in the state. 60% of the people who voted for it. Defines marriage as that between a man and a woman. Your position on this today, is this a big issue in this campaign? Is it a not so big issue? How do you feel about it today?
Well, I feel that people should have the freedom to marry who they choose, but I don't sense that it will be a big issue, but it could be. I think a lot of people's viewpoints have evolved. A lot of states have moved forward on this. We want to make sure in Wisconsin we're welcoming.
Do you think it hurts business if you have a ban on same-sex marriage? I've had a couple of people in prominent businesses in this area who've said, we have some people who we would like to bring to Milwaukee. They're talented people, young executives, and they're not sure. And part of it is because they're not sure about the environment. Do you think that's true, or is that an exaggerated tale?
No, I think those instances, I hear about them all the time as well. And I think it's, and now when people have other options of other states where gay marriage is allowed, they do have other options. And it's not only whether they're coming, but I've even had met folks who live in Wisconsin, live along the border with Minnesota, who are actually getting on in age. They have been couples for many, many years, and they're saying, I think we may move because we have health issues, legal issues surrounding our health, and even we have right now, we don't even know if our domestic partner registry will continue here. So it's not as if we're not only not moving forward, we're actually in some ways perhaps moving back.
It's probably not a big issue in this race, but it's interesting to see what's happening around the country, places like Colorado and Washington, where they have legalized recreational marijuana. What's your stance on that? Do you favor the legalization of recreational marijuana? Do you favor the legalization of medicinal marijuana? Or do you, as some law enforcement people suggest, any legalization would be a bad move?
Well, I think legalization of medicinal marijuana makes a lot of sense, and I feel really bad for people who are suffering from debilitating diseases who are not able to get that. So I would definitely favor that. With regards to legalization of marijuana, it just wouldn't be a priority for me, and I don't believe that that's where we're at in Wisconsin.
All right, let me ask you about Act 10, because you get a lot of questions about this, and you can clarify your position on the issue. What you would or wouldn't do if you were governor. There are people who would love to see, and the public employee unions would love to see Act 10 repealed in its entirety. What's your stance on it? What would you be willing to do, and what would you not be willing to do?
Well, what I've said is that I will work to restore collective bargaining. And I don't think that collective bargaining stands in the way of having effective and efficient and accountable government. There were changes that had to be made. I mean, we needed contributions to health care and retirement, but we also have to make sure we are able to attract and keep good people in our public sector. I'm seeing the impact in education already. There's fewer people who are now pursuing education as a career. Because of what they have seen. And in many cases, salaries have not kept pace under under Act 10. The only thing that can be bargained for is a 1% or 2% basically rate of inflation increase in salaries. So you get folks who are looking, young folks who say, I'm not sure I see a career there. I'm not even sure whether I can go back from a master's in education because with the student debt that I'll take on, I'm not sure I can cover it with the type of salaries I'll make. So it's really important. If we want to have thriving schools and thriving students, we need to have good educators in the classroom. And I'm concerned that we are not doing the things that are going to make sure we can ensure that.
Given the state's finances when the governor took office, do you think he deserves any credit for getting the state back on a more sound financial footing?
Well, he balanced the budget, but that's something that's required by the Constitution. I would not have done it in the way that he has. And while he, got rid of the structural deficit in his first budget, we're back up now. You know, we're back up to an $800 million structural deficit going into the next biennium. We have hundreds of millions of dollars of transportation projects, which we don't know how we are going to fund. We have taken on $1.2 billion in debt, and now we've actually even already spent a projected surplus, a surplus we don't even know if we'll have for another 18 months. So I'm not going to give any kudos because, frankly, all that has been done in the last 6 months in a lead up to an election seems to have turned the clock back on any progress.
He says it's the people's money, taxpayers' money. What do you say to that?
It is, absolutely, and we should be fiscally responsible with it. And I think anyone who knows me, whether it's at Trek, the work I've done in nonprofits at the Boys and Girls Club, or certainly on the Madison School Board, I'm known as the fiscal conservative on the Madison School Board. It is the taxpayers' money, and we have to make sure that we are making good use of it. But we should be setting priorities, and I know that people do care about whether there are going to be jobs for their children, whether we are going to have a thriving economy, whether we are making the investments, frankly, we have to make if we're going to position Wisconsin for the future.
There seems like you can't go on a web page without seeing an ad that mentions you backwards Burke.
I see them every morning.
Yeah, you see them every morning. They're there. It's tying you, obviously, to the Jim Doyle administration, to your years of service in the Jim Doyle administration. How will you counter that during this campaign, this notion that those were the bad old days and Mary Burke was part of them?
Well, unemployment when I was Commerce Secretary was 4.8%. So I stand by my record at Commerce. We had 72,000 more jobs than we have currently. I was there for about 3 years, and we did a lot of good work. We actually enacted some of the best programs that continue today for entrepreneurs under Act 255, which were angel and venture tax credits. I was involved in attracting Uline, new headquarters to Kenosha. We reopened the paper mill in Park Falls. I mean, there is a lot of good work that I stand by for what I did at Commerce, but, the unemployment rate was 4.8%, and we had a whole lot more jobs than we have currently.
So you can put that connection behind you. You don't think that's a significant part of the election in any way?
Well, I think that's, I think it seems like Governor Walker feels like he's running against Governor Doyle instead of Mary Burke. And I come from, 30 years, almost all of it in the private sector, and to take and spin it in a way that's politically advantageous for him will no doubt be a tactic, but it's not one that I'm going to buy into, and I want to make sure that people have a chance to get to know me, get to know what I have been doing and the track record I have.
Given any thoughts to debates, what you'd like to do, how many of them you'd like to do, anything like that? Too early in the process.
I want to come back here.
Okay, well, we'll see.
No, I'd love to have as many as possible. I think it's a great opportunity for voters, for people in Wisconsin to get to know the candidates.
We'll see what we can do to make that happen. What I'd like to do now is take a few questions from the audience. And here's my only advice for the day. No speeches, please. Just ask your question, and we'll get to as many as possible. I'm going to start here, and I'll work my way back up, and we'll eventually get over here for at least 3 questions. Go ahead.
Hi, Mary. First of all, thanks for coming. It's an honor to speak to you. My question is regarding the constitutional right of voting. You're on record of being against presenting a photo ID while voting, and you're on record against, so to be consistent, can we assume you're also against showing an ID for another constitutional right? This is the Second Amendment on purchasing a firearm. I'm just thinking you have to be consistent on both constitutional rights, don't you? And I have a brief follow-up.
Well, I actually think that there is a difference between voting and buying a firearm, and I certainly believe No, And I certainly believe in our Second Amendment rights, and certainly, we have a long heritage here in Wisconsin of gun ownership, of hunting, and I respect that. But I do believe that we need to have background checks, and I think that people should present an ID. But in voting, I don't believe that people should, and I think that the recent move to certainly the laws to require that are being held up in the Supreme Court right now stand in the way of people's right to democracy and to vote. And not only I believe that, but I also want to make sure that as governor, I set a priority of nonpartisan redistricting so that people's vote really means something.
Real brief. You like that?
If you were to give Governor Walker a grade, the old school A to F, what would you give him?
I'm not going to give him a.
All right, let me move back up here. There's a young woman to the right up there. Yes, you. Please stand up and speak into the microphone.
Since you believe that Walker's budgets are creating deficits and you don't plan on raising taxes, how will you be able to pay for the many areas that you want to increase spending in? And what are the 3 biggest cuts that you're going to make to balance the budget?
Well, as I said, I'm going to go line item by line item through the budget. It's a $70 billion budget, and I know from work I have done and a lot of other organizations, there are savings to be found in that. I would also make sure that we are accepting federal money that helps to support our infrastructure, that makes health care more affordable, and I would not turn down hundreds of millions of dollars in Medicaid money. So that is something that is going on.
I want to make sure. How about right here? Yes, you. Yeah, hang on. Wait for the microphone.
As far as Wisconsin goes, with the somewhat shaky rollout of the Affordable Care Act, I want to know your confidence in the federal government in continuing to guarantee enhanced funding for, in particular, our state.
Sure. Well, the federal government has said that they will pay 100% of that cost for the first 3 years and then 90% after that. And that is a lot of money that would be able to come back into Wisconsin that frankly fuels our economy, makes health care more affordable. And I think we can depend on the federal government to stand behind its commitments. But I'll tell you, I see a lot of money that is put out by the federal government that does not necessarily say it's going to be there forever, and yet we still take it, as we should. Wisconsin does not get its fair share of federal government money. This is our Wisconsin taxpayer money that we are paying into Washington. And as governor, I'm going to fight for every single dollar to make sure that we are getting our fair share, because this is what helps fuel our economy.
Let me, Ryan, move over this way. We're going to move over a little bit. We're going to try and hit all 3 sections of the room here. Yeah, let's try this gentleman right here in the black jacket.
Hi, Mary. I'm Harry from Milwaukee. I have a question a little bit more specific about TREC. With the key point of your jobs plan being insourcing or bringing our jobs back to our shores, will you commit to bringing TREC's 800 jobs back to Wisconsin? And how can we trust you when you already outsourced jobs before?
Well, as I had mentioned in response to Mike's question, I want to work with all Wisconsin companies and identify areas that can be jobs that can be brought back. But Trek produces more bikes in the U.S. than any other company, but it's a very competitive industry, and not one of its competitors produces even one bike here in the U.S.
Other questions? Oh, the hands have gone down. You must be answering all the questions here, so let's go over here, and then we'll come down here. Yes.
What's your position on use of geothermal energy?
Well, we should be looking at all different opportunities that we have in Wisconsin to tap into alternative energies and to develop those. This is actually a growing industry for many states around the country, and Wisconsin has frankly actually gone backwards. I talked to a gentleman just a couple of months ago who had a business in solar panels, and he employed 35 people. In the last 3 years, he has laid off 32 of those. He's down to 3 people. So clean energy is actually a way for us to be growing our economy and really builds on not only the research, but the infrastructure that we have and the manufacturing talent that we have here in Wisconsin. So I'd be looking at how we can grow those industries.
Yes, sir. Press down on that if you would, please, so we can hear you. No, on the rim, little, on the rim, the side there. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you. Took a while. What can we expect from the Burke administration in the first 100 days?
Well, that's why I've taken, this is 5 months and gotten out this jobs plan, because this is going to be what I'll start with right away on day one. The most important thing will be putting in a team in place. I want to make sure I have great people on my team, and so between getting the team in place and implementing this jobs plan, that's going to be the priorities on day one.
You've said that's a starting point for you.
Yes.
That you intend to fine-tune as you talk to people or get input from people? Or?
That's right. So between now and November, this is the starting point for an economic development and jobs plan. But I'm going to be having a lot of conversations. I want to get more input from people, refine this plan, and then hit the ground running.
We'll do here.
Specifically, would there be any money for fixing potholes?
Well, and that's
Fixing potholes,
yes,
is what he said. Yes.
Danae Davis from Milwaukee, and my question is, I really loved hearing you talk about seeking common ground throughout on a number of measures, and I'm specific, and I love the fact that you love Milwaukee as you do the rest of the state. So my question is, how would you approach having the rest of the state love Milwaukee more?
Everybody hear that? How do you approach getting the rest of the state to love Milwaukee more?
Mm-hmm. The tone is set by the governor, and I think that if I set the tone that says, hey, we are going to be stronger. If we have a strong Milwaukee, we will have a thriving Wisconsin. If we have a strong Milwaukee, in my plan, I outline that we have, overall, since the year 2000, the U.S. economy has grown by 1.4% in jobs. During that same period of time, Wisconsin has lost 1.4% of its jobs. Now, we have areas of the state, South Central, along with western Wisconsin, that have grown at 6%. But we have also seen in southeastern Wisconsin here and in the northern part of the state where we have actually contracted, we've lost 5% or more of our jobs. The Milwaukee area is a third of Wisconsin's economy. We have to make sure that Milwaukee is thriving. And so, we have a vested interest. Unfortunately, too often, it is about dividing people and pitting them against each other, that the message is if Milwaukee gets something, it's somehow being taken away from another one. You have to change that message. That shouldn't be the message. It should be like when Wisconsin wins, when Milwaukee wins, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead. Then I'm going to go here, and then I'll come up to you next. Okay.
The question I have for you, Mary. In the past, you've said, I think here, that you'd like to hold the line on taxes, or you will hold the line on taxes. You've also indicated in the past that you feel the rich should pay their fair share. Do you find there's a discrepancy between those statements, and will they both still be true after the jobs plan is implemented? Because you've mentioned investments several times. Mm-hmm. And investments, another word for spending. And I know you said you're going to look for the fraud, abuse, and waste. You've been in government, so do you know where to look? And can you tell us first whether or not that is a little bit of a contradiction in holding the line and yet the rich paying their fair share? And secondly, where you would be looking if you can't find it?
Sure.
What would you do?
Yeah. No, I don't think that there's any conflict at all. I mean, as I had mentioned, Wisconsin's income tax rates are actually above the national average, and so in holding the line on taxes, you certainly see that at the upper income brackets, you do see levels that are higher than a lot of states, and so I don't see an issue or conflict between those at all. The biggest issue we can do in terms of funding investments elements that will drive Wisconsin's economy forward is making sure that the economy is growing. If Wisconsin had grown since 2010 at just the national average, our economy would be nearly $2 billion bigger. Well, that's an increase that helps support that investment and taxes without raising taxes at all, with holding the line. So in the long term, that's what we have to do. We have to make sure that we are growing our economy and that we are able to still hold the line on taxes.
Yes.
If you support bringing back collective bargaining, would you also bring back mandatory arbitration for those unions that have lost it?
Well, I think that the other things that I would certainly support is making sure that unions can deduct dues from paychecks, making sure also that in terms of being able to certify that the vote is one that is not based on it's based on who's voting, not all the eligible voters. But I'd look at each parts of Act 10 and make sure and understand what the impact is on not only our state government, but on jobs. Because there were, as I said, there were some changes that had to be made, and I'd look through that and see whether they are ones that how would you say it, that they are ones that are necessary, and what the other impacts would be.
Yes, sir.
Hello, we've had many Milwaukee County judges come speak to us about alternative sentencing and about the impact of for-profit prisons. What is your stance on both of those?
Well, Wisconsin spends almost twice the amount that Minnesota spends on corrections. We have states all around the country, including those that are strong Republican states like Texas, looking at alternatives because they're realizing the current system is not working, that we are putting people in prison who are not necessarily dangerous to communities, that they are getting out and going back into prison. It's more expensive to put people in prison than it is, frankly, to put them in schools. And we're spending more in corrections than we are on higher education. So I'm going to look at all the options to be able to drive that cost down, but also, first and foremost, we have to keep our communities safe. So I believe we can do that without jeopardizing safety issues. In fact, making our communities more safe.
For-profit prisons, I think, was the other part of the question.
Any
feelings about that?
Yeah, no, I don't favor for-profit prisons. I don't think that that's something. What we should be looking at is how we actually reduce the cost without but I don't think that's an option that makes sense.
Time for just a couple of more questions. Sure, and then, yeah, we'll go right back here again. Do that again.
Mary, you opened today's session saying that you had a different way to run the state, and you did bring up Governor Doyle. I am curious, with the budget deficit that was left, how you would have treated the $3.6 billion budget deficit differently to balance the budget, as you said, was necessary by state law to do.
Well, I would have looked at every area of the budget and made sure that we were making cuts that would not impact, would have the least negative impact on the state. And so, it's a $70 billion budget, and I would have looked at every single one of those. Those are tough choices that have to be made, but there's certainly areas that you have to make them in.
Do you have some examples of where you would have made those changes, what you would have done differently?
No, I haven't gone back and looked at that budget.
Yes.
I got Dr. Hope on that.
There you go.
Mary, you're familiar with people-powered transportation. Do you have any suggestions in terms of how we can improve our overall transportation infrastructure in Wisconsin, and specifically to speak to the initiative or the stimulus money that was available to Wisconsin that we turned down to create a rail service between Madison and Milwaukee?
Yeah, well, I would have definitely accepted that money. That was important infrastructure for our state to put us into the 21st century, link us with strong economies in Chicago and the Twin Cities. It would have meant thousands of construction jobs and manufacturing jobs right here in Milwaukee. So I would definitely have accepted that. And as governor, we have to make sure that we are investing in our transportation infrastructure in alternative methods, not necessarily just our roads or our highways, and figure out how we are going to fund that. There are serious transportation issues, and the funding issues are ones where right now we borrowed a lot of money to pay for the current transportation project. So we not only have to look to alternatives that may be more cost effective, but we also have to look at what options we have for funding those. But I definitely would have taken the train money.
Anybody else in this section over here yeah, go ahead.
How would you address the new Commerce Department, WEDC? How would you make that more accountable?
Yeah, we now have the Wisconsin Economic Development Agency, which is a reworking of the Commerce Department. How do you feel about that? How do you make its most effective?
Well, I feel that what's most important is the function and the effectiveness of the organization rather than the form. So I'm not saying that I would change it back, but I don't think it needed to be changed in the first place. That was, and we saw that the rollout of it was extremely poorly managed. There was a loss of tracking of taxpayer money and accountability. There's been huge turnover in the leadership in that organization, and most recently we have seen that they're not even spending the money appropriated to them. And this is at the same time that I hear from entrepreneurs and small businesses across the state that they can't get the funding that they need in order to expand. So I would go through and just make sure that we had accountability around all the different monies. We also measure the effectiveness. We have to make sure that the money that is being spent is actually creating jobs or fueling economies, whether it's our regional, local, or state economies. But those aren't things that actually are that difficult to do. And so the fact that it wasn't done from the get-go in WEDC is disappointing. It was completely mismanaged.
One final question, yes. Yeah, press down on the rim, not the ball, but the rim. Just hold your finger down on that.
Oh, hi, Mary. Sally Peltz. I know this is going to be a very, very contentious race. The state is so highly polarized, and it's not going to be any less polarized during this race. What is it going to cost in terms of getting you to win?
Well, I have little doubt that I will be outspent. And when you talk about campaigns, you do unfortunately have to talk about money. If it was up to me, we'd have some serious campaign finance that didn't make it all about money. And I have seen already, I'm sure anyone who turns on the TV much, is that the Republican Governors Association has been launched $1.2 million of attack ads against me across the state, trying to define me before I can define myself. So it makes sure I have to raise the money that's going to be needed to get my message out, define myself before they define me. But I believe the people of Wisconsin who want to see a change in leadership will support that, and will support not only it financially, but support it in a way of being able to volunteer, have boots on the ground, have a great turnout. And that's what, those are really the two pieces. As I said in the beginning, I have a team that knows how to win. I believe I have a game plan for winning. What I need to do is make sure I raise the resources that enough to compete. I am deeply concerned that Walker raises more than 50% of his money from outside of Wisconsin. What that says to me is that it is non-Wisconsin people who are trying to win our governorship and determine who our next governor is. And I don't think that sits well with just about anyone. And so that is going to be important. But it's about people getting out, volunteering, sharing their perspective with other people, making sure people are energized for the campaign. But every day I am more confident of winning, and it is because of the people that I talk to every day and the support that I'm getting.
I'm going to wrap things up there. I'm wondering if I can indulge you for 1 minute. I just want to make you aware. We've got a lot of people here who are interested in the world around them, and we've got a number of events here at the law school that we'd like to make you aware of. Tomorrow, Professor Charles Franklin will reveal the latest results of the Marquette University Law School poll. It's funny how that, just could have been here tomorrow. We might have had a whole lot to talk about. But Charles will be with us tomorrow at 12:15. Next week, April 1st, we're going to be looking at the education situation in Milwaukee. Alan Borsick, one of my colleagues here, who has put together a great conference. It's going to explore lessons from elsewhere that might be applicable to Milwaukee's education system. Beyond that, we'd like to have lots of voices here. We will have the Milwaukee County Sheriff here, David Clark, on April 10th. And a busy week, April 21st, former Obama National Security Advisor, General James Jones, will be with us. He is now a proponent of the Keystone Pipeline, so we'll hear what he has to say about that and also talk about Ukraine, all kinds of stuff. On Tuesday, music mogul turned social entrepreneur, Kenny Gamble. He's running some charter schools now in Milwaukee. He's a Philadelphia guy who is doing some pretty interesting things in the African-American communities and neighborhoods of this country. And then on Wednesday, we will have Senator Tammy Baldwin with us. That's on the 23rd of April. So we've got a busy lineup coming up. We hope you can join us for some or all of them. And thanks for your attention today, and most of all, thanks to the Democratic candidate for governor, Mary Burke.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.